It's time for San Antonio Movers and Shakers. Stay tuned as we celebrate the education, business, civic, and public leaders who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio. And now, here are your hosts for today's Movers and Shakers program. Bjorn Dibdahl from Bjorn's Audio and Video, Scott Wolfold, President of Documation, and John Thurman, San Antonio's most listened to realtor.
Good morning, and you're tuned into the Documation San Antonio Movers and Shakers show, where we celebrate the education, business, civic, and public leaders who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio.
Yeah, and you know what's so funny about this morning? 2/3 of the people that were announced that were on this show aren't here. Yeah, they're chickens.
No, they're out at the golf course.
Yeah, yes. Well, John Thurman called me yesterday, and he said, I won't be there because they actually did the earlier shows live out there. And I said, I'm not going out there. I'm not going to get caught in that mess. So
out at the Valero,
yeah,
Texas Open.
I think our guest this morning, Judge Peter Sakai, feels fine about that we could do it in the studio. So
I'm quite comfortable right now.
Good. Okay, for those of you who have just recently discovered the show, and I know there's a number of you because when you come in the store you mention the show, and you want to hear previous guests, there's a simple way to do it. Just simply go to your computer, go to samoversandshakers.com, spell the and you'll see the picture or the name, and just click on it, and there's a show, and I think you can also download it for iPod use as well. So our guest this morning is Judge Peter Sakai. He's a 225th District Court Judge. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Bjorn. Bjorn and Brian.
Morning, John.
So now, your background, I did just a real quick thing. Down in the valley.
Yep, grew up and born in down in Rio Grande Valley, born in McAllen, Texas.
But your name doesn't indicate that.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so, bring me up on that.
All right, you want me to connect the dots for you?
You bet.
All right. I was born in 1954, and so my family has some interesting roots. Mm-hmm. My grandparents are from Japan and were the first-generation immigrants. My grandfather came over through the Seattle port and through the West Coast, and then ultimately as a farmer and interested in farming, made his way down to South Texas. He came to the Houston area because at that time in Texas history, mm-hmm. there were a lot of Japanese Americans that came to the Houston area to start up rice farming, and then he broke off and went down to the Rio Grande Valley in the early 1920s.
So when did they first arrive in Washington?
My grandparents, they came in about early 1920s, late 19-teens, mm-hmm. and so that's when they came to Texas. And, you know, they were like any immigrant that came to this country to seek opportunity and fortune.
Yeah, now, but what caused them to leave Japan? Do you know that?
Well, I think it's like anything. They were in a country that they felt that, at that time, a lot of the society was in a caste-type system. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of upward mobility. If you were born in a certain level, that's where you stayed. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, they decided, they were like a lot of immigrants who decided they wanted to seek out and come to the land of opportunity and fortune, and so they came to the United States.
Did they come with much?
No, they came with nothing, and both my mother's side and father's side. My father's side, they settled in the Imperial Valley of Southern California, mm-hmm. and set up as farmers there. Mm-hmm. But their experience was very different because on my father's side, they got caught up in the internment issue, mm-hmm. with Japanese Americans on the West Coast. That was a West Coast situation. And so when War II broke loose, my father was a teenager at that time. And so he grew up in the camp. And in order to get out of the internment camp, he joined the military and went with the United States Army. Was part of the occupational force in Japan. And then after that came out, and him and his buddy wanted to do farming. So they heard about the opportunities down in South Texas. So people don't realize, but at one time there were probably about 100 Japanese American families in the Rio Grande Valley, all practically tied to farming. So that's where my roots are as far as concerned.
What did they farm?
They were primarily vegetable farmers, and then, of course, in the valley, the summers are very hot, so it's grain, cotton, melons, onions.
Are you the only child?
No, I got a brother, two brothers, and a sister. Brother's still down there, and I have a brother in Austin and a sister here in San Antonio.
So where did you come in? Are they older or younger?
I'm the oldest.
Okay. Now, what's your earliest memory? Thinking back, your earliest memory.
My earliest memory, I guess, was growing up on the farm down in McAllen. Actually, we lived in a town called Hidalgo, which is a city right across from Mexico on the border from Reynosa, and then our farms were all in that area. But just growing up, and my dad was a small to medium-sized farmer back in those days, and he just kind of started with nothing and ultimately bought a farm and had a big farm operation at some point, and then eventually got out, and then let's see. But as far as memories concerned, we definitely had to do a lot of farm work.
So did your grandparents still farm down there at the same time, or was it just your father farming down there?
Yeah, but by that time, when my father set up, my grandparents were pretty much on a retired status, and so it was my father, my uncles.
So they took over the farm?
Correct.
Okay, so it stayed in the family.
It stayed in the family.
Okay, now you were kind of going, and you came back to this earliest memory. Your dad. Did he get out of the farming business?
Ultimately, he did. He ultimately, the economy and the business of farming was just so tough at some point that he had to retire, and he ultimately ended up working for a farming operation.
Okay. Now, how long, or the part of your life that you lived down there, was it your whole early school years?
Yeah, I was born there and went to high school at McAllen High School, and went 2 years to the local college there, which is now known as UTPA, University of Texas Pan American, and then decided that I needed to leave and move on, and so I went.
I'm not going to let you go there right now.
Okay, we're not going there because I was going to put that plug for you, my UT Longhorns.
No. See, I have a grandson who just started A&M. No, we can't talk about it.
We won't go there, will we?
So during your early school years, what do you remember about those years, and what were they like for you? Like grade school?
Well, the valley has its own uniqueness and flavor and its own character. Obviously, it's a Hispanic majority community, and so the Hispanic culture is very dominant down there. So I remember growing up, and and the only Asians basically were me, my brothers, sisters, and my cousins, and so it raised some interesting dynamics. And of course, I think I've come to appreciate that very much, because now that I'm an elected official and I have to run for office and get involved in politics, I very much deeply appreciate and understand the Hispanic culture. In fact, my wife's Hispanic, so I've come to love the influence, the Hispanic influence, and the strong flavor and character it brings to this community here in San Antonio.
But at the same time, because when I came from Norway, there were always kids who would make fun of the foreigner. Okay, did you run into that in your early years?
Yeah, those are the what I call the character building days. Certainly in grade school, it created perhaps some conflicts. And I guess at the time I would have said, kids could be cruel and tease and make fun, and some of it was racial and. But I think I've come to realize that certainly it's made me pretty tough person in running for office and having to deal with that. So I've chosen to look at those life experiences as challenges and obstacles, and working how to get through that. And part of, I think, being a minority of minorities in essence, helped me become just a stronger person, and it also made me appreciate my culture. Perhaps I think my parents really made an effort for me to be American, and being American was to really do well in school, get an education, not really focus on the culture and the identity that my ancestors come. That's something I've had to do in my later life, is to look back and see where I came from, so that I could show my kids and generations to come who they are.
Well, now during those young school years, were you a good student?
Yes, I think the teachers probably called my parents in a few times to just let them know that I needed to focus a little bit harder on my studies and maybe not talk so much. Maybe that's why I got into politics.
So how did your parents handle those discussions with you?
There was usually a corporal punishment type of process. And so if I didn't get it with the warning and admonition, then there was some swift and decisive punishment.
So when you got home from school, what would your typical day be like when you got home from school?
Oh, well, in my world back then, of course, raising on a farm, it was like, okay, do your homework. All right, let's go do some chores. And so Dad would come in the pickup truck, pick us up, and we'd go out there and do what needed to be done.
Okay. So you were working.
We were
working at a very young age.
We were working, and I think the story my mom loves to tell is that at one point, I think I was 12 years old, and now that you're bringing these memories back, Bjorn, I remember that my dad had decided to go to California to go visit some relatives, and he left me in charge. And so I had to run a farm back there. And so,
at 12 years old.
At 12 years old, yeah.
Now, you mentioned that your cousins and your brothers and sisters kind of comprise the Asian community there. Were y'all all real close with your cousins and everything? Did you have a lot of family interaction like that?
Yeah, we did a lot of social stuff. And, of course, in living on a farm community, we weren't in the city, so to speak, although at that time McAllen wouldn't have been considered a city. But, we kind of lived close to each other, so we kind of shared things, did things. But Bajor, you're right. The word is work. We were given chores to do and work to do, and it was pretty much tied to the farm.
At that early age, was it going to be a foregone conclusion that Peter was going to go to college?
Yes. The education was just pounded into me. It's interesting because my parents didn't go to college.
No.
They didn't. They had to. My father and my mother both graduated from high school, but they learned real quickly the value of education, and so they pushed it. So they pushed us to do well in school.
Their education was in Japan, right?
No.
Your parents.
My mother and father were born here,
right.
so I'm second generation born here in the United States. But the education piece was pretty much pounded into us kids to go to college. And what's interesting now, looking back, and the questions you ask is that I don't really think they had a clue as to what I should do when I went to college. They didn't help me career plan. They didn't suggest anything. Their thing was go to college and then go to work. And so it was kind of just
whatever that meant.
It was just a process to go through. So, excuse me. So I knew that I had to go to college, and so that's the reason why I went the first 2 years at the local school, because since I was the oldest, my parents made it real clear that they had I had two brothers and a sister that they had to feed, and so they were like, "You're on your own, kid." And so I went to school there, but I had to work. So I was working, and I pretty much did farm labor work. I worked at produce packing sheds and put in 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and went to school. And then save my money, and then I decided that I needed to.
I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
Because I want to come back to middle school and high school.
All right.
Don't want to be rude, but
all right.
Guess what? Guess what, Brian?
Well, it's time for our San Antonio Business Journal intermission to the Documation San Antonio Movers and Shakers Show, where we celebrate the education, business, civic, and public leaders who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio. When we return, we'll continue honoring our guest, Judge Peter Sakai. Welcome back to the Documation San Antonio Movers and Shakers Show, where we celebrate the education, business, civic, and public leaders who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio.
And our honoree this morning,
Judge Peter Sakai,
the judge of the 225th District Court. We got that one down.
You got it.
All right, now, we've gotten you basically to middle school. Any memories of middle school and then moving on into high school that made a difference in your life? Were there any teachers, for example, that kind of helped direct you or were mentors in your life?
Well,
coaches.
Yeah,
anything like that?
I started playing football when I was in junior high. The coach there was an older coach that had been there for many years, and he retired there. He was one of the few coaches. Stanley Etnar was his name. God, I haven't mentioned his name in 40, 50 years, and he was a coach just committed to teaching kids. He easily could have gone to the high school level and been most successful, but he was a very successful junior high coach, and he was just a disciplinarian. He was from old school. It was you did things over and over till you did it right, and so he was a coach that. And I remember quite vividly. Now that you're shaking the memories here. In 1967 was Hurricane Beulah. It was a major flood down there in the valley. And at some point where I live, we got cut off from the school. Couldn't go to school because of the flood. So I think I missed a good 6-8 weeks of school. Well, it was right in the middle of football season. And so when I reported back, because we could get through to school when the floodwaters receded, immediately got disciplined for not reporting to football practice, and I had to run wind sprints to make up for the lost practices, and thought that was unfair, but that's the way it was, and that's kind of some of the life experiences that I've gone through that kind of just taught me that discipline's very important. It's very important to kids and to families and to the community.
I recently read a book called Everyone's a Coach by Don Shula and Ken Blanchard. And the gist of the book is practice, 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 practice. And, I mean, he epitomized that on what he did. And it sounds like this is junior high coach.
It was junior high, yeah.
And teaching discipline.
Yeah. Yep. And, of course, this was football back in the late 60s, early 70s. So that it was 3 yards and a cloud of dust, and we just did things over and over, and all those tackling drills. They're still and then we have to practice in these sticker patches. So we didn't have nice artificial turf practice fields and state-of-the-art locker rooms. No. We had old stinking jerseys and that we had to wear all week long, and then at the end of the week, the coach would wash them.
So it toughened you up a little bit.
It very much toughened you up. You learn to appreciate a lot of things.
Somehow you got here.
You made it out alive.
Sometimes now that you raise it that way, I'm like, it is amazing that God has blessed me.
Now, high school. Were you involved in extracurricular activities or you continued some sports?
Stayed in sports, played all the way through. Never was the star of the football team. This was a guy that just stuck it out and played. Got involved, and I guess this is where my political bent comes from. I was a class officer. I want to say my sophomore and senior year was a class officer, was very involved in the organization of school, and was involved in debate. So now that I think about it, there were a lot of things that I did back then that I had no idea that I was prepping myself to be where I'm at today. But as I recall, or as we go on this journey this morning, Bjorn, everything kind of fell into place. So I did do leadership roles as a class officer. I did debate, which sharpened my speaking skills. But I can tell you, at that time, I had no clue that I was going to be a lawyer, much less a judge.
Did you have any idea of anything you liked, any subjects that really piqued your interest, or were you just going through knowing that you had to go to school and you had to somehow get to college?
That's it. And now that I think about it, I see the kids nowadays with all the opportunities and specializations that they could go to. But back then, it was just, I got to get a high school degree, I got to go to college, and I got to go figure out how to get a job. And
so what I'm hearing, I think, is that there were no scholarships here.
No. In fact, now that you jogged the memory again, I remember my senior year, and my mom was real worried that I hadn't picked a college. And she was like, well, where are you going? And I go, I don't know. And since they really didn't have the education of knowing what to do and how to apply for scholarship and what colleges I should go to and on and on, I was just muddling my way through. So when I didn't show much direction, my mother got kind of worried about that and took me to the school counselor. And I remember my school counselor going, well, maybe I ought to just go to technical school. And I remember quite vividly her trying to push me to a computer school at that time. Now, remember, this is late 60s, early 70s, so computers were like, what's that? And those old mainframe machines. And of course, I went, computers, what's that? And now that I think about it, maybe if I'd have gone there, I'd be a multimillionaire. But
we wouldn't be talking about Bill Gates.
Maybe I'd be right there with Bill Gates. But now that I think about it, but I decided, no, I'll figure it out. So that's why I went to the local commuters college there, which allowed me to go to school. It was relatively cheap at that time in the sense of expense. I could pay for it all by myself by working.
You're working. You're paying your way through school.
I'm paying the whole freight. And so my parents didn't have to worry about me. I paid for my own books, bought my little old car, and got to and from school and went to work every day. And so, those are experiences now that I really do value because it had to teach you to have a lot of self-initiative.
But you're still living at home.
I'm still living at home.
Okay. And you still working on the farm, or
still? Well, no. At this time, my dad wasn't paying me.
I like him.
And so I decided, and in fact, we kind of had to have a heart-to-heart. He was like, "Well, why are you leaving?" I'm going, "Well, you're not paying me." And he goes, "Well, you're getting room and board."
Yeah.
And so I was like, and of course, you couldn't question. My father, he was one you didn't question, so I just had to respectfully say yes, but I just needed to get some spending money and figure out how to go to college and pay for it. So when I told him that they weren't giving me any financial aid, he backed off on that and let me go.
Well, if you just joined the show, we're interviewing for San Antonio Movers and Shakers Judge Peter Sakai, the 225th District Court Judge. And we're now into his college years. Now, you went, did you carry a full load?
Yes.
Okay. And so you did the 2 years at Pan American?
Did 2 years at University of Pan American, and then at some point I decided, I was doing fairly well at school even though I was working full-time, but I decided that, and it was just, I don't know, it was by the grace of God, I said, I have to leave. I have to leave if I want to go do something. And so I had buddies at the University of Texas, Austin, and they said, just come on up and we'll take care of you and we'll give you a place to stay. And so my buddies from McAllen, and they put me up and had some instant roommates and lived in an apartment up there at Austin and finished there. And
so you transferred.
Over.
Again, what did you do for money?
I had money saved up.
Ah. There is such a thing as saving?
Yes, there is. Oh. Even though my children perhaps don't understand that concept very well. Yes, back then we did save, and we put it away. And, of course, now that I think about it, life was far more simpler back then.
Yeah.
And, of course, the cost of higher education was, I think it was $5 a class hour. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't like he made a ton of money either
Yes.
at the same time.
I think
so.
I was making a buck an hour or something to that effect. So.
Yeah. So now you're at Texas. Are you starting to see a direction for your life, or your career, I should say?
No. I went over there and had to pick a major.
Yeah.
Hadn't really thought about that.
So what was it?
So I picked political science, government.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just decided to do that. And not having to work all the time, I really was able to bring my grades up, got better grades there. And so did fairly well there and got to the point of, okay, well, I've got a government degree, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at a crossroads of, all right, do I go to work? And if I go to work, what do I do? And because, again, my parents didn't have that background and didn't have the education that college education or a bigger picture of how to succeed in society, I was just having to kind of muddle it through. And so at that time, it was, well, I can go to graduate school, I can go to law school, or I can go to work. Mm-hmm. And I decided I wanted to keep going to school.
Were you dating or anything at the time?
Oh, yeah, I think I was. I don't remember their names.
Okay.
And we'll leave it at that. How about that, Bjorn?
Okay, that's fair. But why law school?
It's because now that you bring those memories back, I had a good friend. And in fact, it was a girl. It wasn't a girlfriend, but it was a girl who I had a lot of classes with. And she, I think, as I recall, came from Dallas, and she was well-to-do. She was going to law school. She was going to go to UT Law School, and there was no doubts about it. She was a very driven, very sharp person. And so she literally just said, hey, you can do this too. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, how do you get to law school? Because I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
She says, well, you got to take the LSAT, which is the entrance exam. I said, well, what's that? Well, it's a test. And so she says, in fact, I'm studying for it. So go buy yourself a workbook, and we'll study together. And so I said, okay. And so we studied for the LSAT and took the exam and threw an application in and got a letter saying,
so school must have not been too much of a difficult thing for if you could just pick up a book, study for the LSAT, and get into law school.
No, I didn't do too well on that exam, but it was one of those things. I think my grades helped balance out my
But you weren't driven to go to law school.
No. Mm-mm. It was one of those, I think, as I look back and I share this story, and I've shared the story with other people, it's just walking down the path of life and come to the forks in the road. And I chose the path least taken.
Yeah. But what a career.
I've done well.
Yeah, so now you enter law school, and that's not the easiest thing in the world for most people.
It wasn't. It was a culture shock. I mean, I literally was the country boy there. Yeah. Obviously, as I recall, I was the only Asian American in UT Law School. Yeah. There were 1,500 students there, the class of 500, and I was the only Asian. So when I showed up and looked around, I was like,
everybody looks different.
Everybody does look different.
So not only are you the country boy, you're also the Asian country boy.
That's right. And so I really, the law school was tough in the sense that I really didn't know if I belonged. I really didn't know if this was the right move.
When did that change?
I just kept going.
Okay.
I just kept walking. I plugged my way. Obviously, I did not graduate at the top of my class. I was one of those C students that just got through.
Were you working during that time as well?
No, I went ahead and applied for financial aid and got loans And I hate to say it because the student loans nowadays are so astronomical.
Yeah.
I came out of UT Law School with a $5,000 school loan.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah.
So I had to pay $50 a month for 10 years, and I paid my school loans back.
All right. So you're in law school. We're getting close to commercial time, aren't we? I think it's appropriate. Let's go to commercial now, and then we're going to take the rest of your life.
Well, it's time for our San Antonio Business Journal intermission to the Documation San Antonio Movers and Shakers show, where we celebrate the education, business, civic, and public leaders who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio. And when we return, we'll wrap a little bit more of your life up. Judge Peter Sakai.
This is News Talk 930 KLUP, The Loop.
How do you get to the heart of the San Antonio business community? With the San Antonio Business Journal. Whether you're looking to learn about, network with, or reach the decision makers that drive San Antonio, the San Antonio Business Journal is your essential business tool. The San Antonio Business Journal has the inside scoop on all that's happening in the San Antonio marketplace. Join the network today of over 57,000 readers who use the Business Journal for local news, in-depth industry coverage, insights, and information. Call 341-3202 to start your 5-week free trial subscription. And when you advertise with the Business Journal, you gain instant presence and added credibility with the business community. 65% of the Business Journal subscribers hold top management positions. Get the attention of these important people and get results. Keep your finger on the pulse of the San Antonio business community and make the San Antonio Business Journal your medium for success today. Call 341-3202. That's 341-3202.
Here's an interesting tidbit that you need to know. More people are buying and owning their own homes than during any other period in U.S. history. This is Michael Medved for San Antonio's most listened to realtor, John Thurman. Think you can save huge sums by representing your own interests in buying or selling a home? Well, the National Association of Realtors reports that the average for sale by owner transaction grosses the seller between 14% and 16% less than the same transaction done by a CRS-designated realtor like John Thurman. And making the wrong move can literally lead to financial ruin. Whether you're buying or selling your home and you want a professional to assist you in doing it right to get the best overall deal for you, then you need to look up John Thurman. He's at heartoftexasrealty.com. I'm Michael Medved, and this is truly a great day in this greatest city, in the greatest nation on God's green earth.
Yeah. All right. We talked about the Cuscaron sale. That'll run through tomorrow. Again, come by, purchase $3.99 and up, and you'll get to pick out an egg, and then you'll bust it either over my head or there's a thing of me there, a stand that you break it, and then you'll find out your discount and or your free price. Again, it's been a lot of fun. Get on our email list because that's how we announce all sorts of special events. And we're going to have another event starting Monday, totally different. It's an audio trade-in event. We've never done it in our 35 years of being in business. So go to our website and get on the email list, and then you'll find out about it. I think it's going to be sent out tomorrow or Monday about the audio trade-in. And again, all of that's happening at Bjorn's on Highway 281 North.
Well, thanks, Bjorn. And welcome back to the Documation San Antonio Movers and Shakers show, where we celebrate the education, business, civic, and public leaders who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio. And today we're talking with Judge Peter Sakai. He's the judge of the 225th District Court.
Yep, and we got him into law school at the University of Texas, and this part of his life, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go to law school. All right, but now you're graduating. You're a average student.
Correct.
And so what's your direction now?
The first thing that I did was, of course, have to figure out, now that I had a law degree, what I was going to do next.
Yeah.
And, of course, back then I kind of just took things as they came. So I just kind of waited till I graduated to figure out, okay, now what? Much like high school. You know, I graduated and went, now what? And so when I graduated, I figured, okay, well, you got to take the bar exam and get your license before you can really move on. So I decided I wasn't going to really do any job seeking till I got. So just worked real hard, busted my butt, passed that bar exam that first time, and then went to go work at the mall because I couldn't find a lawyer job.
At the mall? What do you mean at the mall?
I was working at a mall in Austin, but it was the greatest job.
Doing what?
I was selling clothes.
Oh, you were a salesperson.
Yeah.
I can relate.
Yeah, and I didn't have a suit to my name. I had no dress shirts. I wasn't prepared to be a lawyer, so I decided that if I went to go work for I forgot what store it was at the mall in Austin, that I could get all my clothes on discount and get the sales on top of that. And so, man, I built up my wardrobe.
Good for you.
I thought that was a brilliant move on my part.
Very savvy.
How long?
I just did that for for 6 months. Because then I decided, hold it. Here I was, a law school graduate, licensed lawyer, and working at the mall. I figured, some people are going to question that. So I had accomplished what I needed to do, and that was get my wardrobe set. And so that's when I set out, and I went ahead and started making contacts, and like anybody, just started calling on friends that I went to law school with, and the contacts I made, and made contacts with some old colleagues who had jobs, and by the grace of God, had a friend that was working for the Bexar County District Attorney's Office here in San Antonio in 1979, 1980, and came walking in, and basically with that recommendation, that contact, the district attorney at that time just said, okay, you got a job, come to work.
And what kind of job was that?
I started as a prosecutor.
Okay, so you didn't want, is it that you didn't want to go into a private law firm? You would prefer going into what I perceive as a public side?
I decided that I wanted to develop litigation skills, that I wanted to go into the courtroom. Of course, at that time, that was my thought, was that's what lawyers did. They just go to courtroom and argued, not knowing that there were transactional lawyers, or lawyers that just stay in the office, lawyers that just do paperwork, lawyers that just do argument. I just wanted to go in court and try cases like I saw on TV. That was my concept of being a lawyer. So I decided that I was going to learn that by going to work for the district attorney's office, and that's a career move I've never regretted. And I encourage, in fact, students nowadays that if they want to develop litigation skills or courtroom skills, they should look at the district attorney's office. It's an excellent place to start.
So how long were you there?
I was there for 3 years. Started as an appellate lawyer and wrote legal briefs and did oral arguments before the higher courts of appeals. And then moved over to the juvenile section and started there as a rookie prosecutor. And within a year, they made me a section chief and put me in charge of that section, and put me in charge of 4 or 5 lawyers of juvenile and child abuse. And that's where my career with children really took off, because really focused on juvenile delinquency issues, was in charge of the representing Child Protective Services at that time. And so that's where I developed my career path with being involved with children and families.
So before that was not something you even thought about?
Nope.
Was there anybody that you kind of followed after that, you saw somebody doing something and you're like, wow, I could, really do that? Or did you just kind of, same thing, you got to that office and you
I
decided?
just applied the whole life lessons I've learned when I was a kid. Just work hard, do it right, be honest, be humble. So it's always worked.
So now you're in that section. How long were you there?
I was section chief for about 1.5 years, and then there was a change of administration in the DA's office at the time, and I decided it was time to go to private practice. And so went out and opened up a shingle.
On your own?
On my own. And just decided...
Were you married by this time?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Of course, I had a wife that was a school teacher, so...
So there was income?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had the luxury of just open up private practice and waiting for people to walk in the door.
How long were you married? How long had you been married when you made that decision?
About 1 year.
That's a tough thing.
That was a tough thing.
Okay. So was she happy about that decision?
Oh, we didn't know any better.
Okay.
We didn't have any kids.
Yeah, okay.
And so life was very simple, and I think that's also a life lesson I've learned, is that if you keep things simple, then life can be simple. But if you make it complicated and live a very luxurious lifestyle or live beyond your means, then life can be very complicated and very difficult.
So do you remember your first client? What did you decide your specialty was going to be? Was it going to be general law practice?
It was going to be a general law practice, of course, being a former prosecutor, and that's why a lot of prosecutors in this town who leave and go into private practice, of course, you go back to the court system or for what we call court appointments. And so you represent the indigent. You represent people who are criminally charged and who are unable to hire a lawyer. And so you learn to do that. You learn to just put your name out there in the community, and other lawyers were referring me work, and so I just started from scratch, literally from scratch, and built up a good law practice, a private law practice. Started really shifting over to the civil side of the practice of law with personal injury, workers' compensation cases, and was doing very well. But then there's a point there, Bjorn, where I think it was Judge Tom Reckoff, at that time the juvenile court judge, who had seen me work as a prosecutor and as in private practice representing juveniles and children in our child abuse courts, recognized the work I did. And so he appointed me to be one of his part-time judges that would assist him. And so I did that along with my private practice, and I did that for about 6-7 years, and really enjoyed that because it kind of gave me let me be a judge on a part-time basis, but then let me go back to my law practice, earn the money to pay the bills. And then at some point, that's when the child abuse and neglect cases really started becoming backlogged. And at that time, Judge John Specia and Judge Andy Morales decided to create a child abuse and neglect court. And they came to me and really encouraged me to apply for that position. It was a full-time for which I'd have to give up my private practice. And so that was a tough one. People don't realize that in private practice, it can be very lucrative or be financially rewarding. I was going to have to go back to a salary. And so I had to really think hard and long about that. But what I decided was I had my kids who were small at that time, both of my kids, and I decided that by taking a full-time job, so to speak, and going on salary would allow me to give time back to them. And so I wouldn't have to work 60, 70 hours a week, and I could work the 40 hours a week and then go do the kid stuff.
Dad stuff.
That's right. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do, and that was in 1995. And, of course, I did that for 11 years, and then my mentor and supervisor, Judge John Specia, retired, and that's when I ran for judge of the 225th, and I'm now starting my second full term.
So then that was the first time that you had to run for election, because before it was all appointed.
Correct.
That had to have been a different kind of... How do you do that? I mean, seriously, because you're... Personally, I don't think judges should be elected, but that's a different story. Because most people don't know the roles.
You're right.
So now you decide to run. You had, obviously, competition. You're in your new role. What do you see now? Let's jump to today. What do you see for the future? Because we've only got a couple of minutes.
For the future for Judge Sakai?
Yes.
I'm just going to stick to the formula that's got me here, and that is work hard, be a good public servant, be honest, be humble, try to make a difference, and let the chips fall where they may. And I've just been blessed, and so I think that's my formula, is just to stay with that, and everything else will work itself out. I don't really worry about, well, what's my next move or what's the election process, because you're right. it is a very difficult process to run for office, and especially as a judge, because we have a lot of restrictions. We can't state positions. We can't, obviously promise people anything to get their vote, except to be a good judge. And so, I agree with your philosophy there, but that's the way the rules are, and that's the way we have to play it. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and let the chips fall where they may, and let God will protect me.
Well, I want to ask one more question here, and you don't have much time to answer it, but how do you handle what you hear on a daily basis? How do you handle that emotionally when you go home? Because you hear the family issues. How do you handle that?
I try to leave it at the office, except my wife says that I don't always do that. I think what it is I've learned to make decisions and not look back. You make the decisions and you move forward. Now, am I perfect? Do I make the right decisions for everybody? No, I can't say that. I just make the best decisions that I make at the time. I work hard to listen. I work hard to apply the law. I work hard to provide people a fair and just playing field, and that's all I can do. And when I do that, then I'm satisfied with the decisions I make, and I go home and try to give my family the time that they deserve.
So when do you have to run again?
4 more years.
Okay,
I just got reelected.
All right. Thank you.
Well, I've noticed kind of an overwhelming factor with all of these people that we interview is that they just do the best job they can in the position that they're at, not worrying about what's going on in the future. And it seems like that's where you got to where you are today, and you've been very successful at it.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Judge Sakai.
This has been a blast, Bjorn and Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. Now,
well, it's time to say goodbye for another week here on Documation San Antonio Movers and Shakers Show. I'm Brian Billingsley, and
who do you work for?
I work for Documation.
Come on, tell us real quick again.
Well, just to close up the program, we're a local business technology company. We sponsor the show here, and we're really glad to be a part of it. And what we do is focus on all the input and output devices in people's offices, large and small, and really looking at the whole document workflow process and trying to make it more efficient, more cost productive, and overall easier on the consumer.
So how do they get a hold of you?
341-4431 or at Mation.com.
Mation with an M. Again, thank you, Judge Sakai, for being with us. I wish I knew who next week's guest was. I don't know. You're just going to have to tune in and be surprised, just like I am. I know we have a guest. We have a whole list.
Where could they find out if they wanted to know?
San Antonio Movers and Shakers is the website.
What's the website? SA Movers and Shakers San Antonio, but it's SA. We abbreviate it. Okay. SAMoversandshakers.com.
All right, it's the people who keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive in San Antonio, and mentorship is the engine that makes it possible. If you haven't written a thank you letter or personally called the people who are doing such an incredible job to lead this greatest city and the greatest nation on earth, then do so this week. And join us next week for another San Antonio Movers and Shakers show.